Okay, welcome back. We're into our second workshop, our LTP strategic direction. I'm going to hand over to Mia, and she knows that it's taken as read, but she'll give you a couple of things before we go into questions.
Yes, that's right. So, councillors, we have provided in front of you and in the slides our go at the refined strategic direction following the first workshop. Really, the focus of this is to discuss it amongst yourselves and see if we've tested it correctly and whether the intent is there. It's not about perfect wording today. That will come through a TPK meeting later. It's about the direction. Just quickly on this slide, I wanted to draw your attention to where we're at in the process. This was included in previous material without a discussion. Just wanted to draw your attention to the opportunity for early engagement. There was a plan included within your pack. So before we go into the full discussion on priorities, just wanted to gain any feedback about that and then happy to take any questions.
Jeff.
Warmly supportive. It is an improvement on what I would think is status quo in terms of LTP engagement. I note the wording of the questions that came up were very familiar to points that had been raised both by me and Councillor Lawler, so that has been incorporated into. Thank you very much for us. It probably saves you guys some time as well, so that would be my feedback. Kia ora.
Anyone else on the communications? Yes, Moira? Oh, no, it's okay. Okay, now we're doing the communication question only. Yep.
Okay.
Rob, no?
Fine.
So everyone's happy with that? Yes. Now we're going to the general questions. So I have Jeff, then Ross.
First of all, I want to thank officers for preparing this material based on the feedback. I think that for the most part, you've got the gist of what we're trying to achieve. Likewise, I have no notes on any changes to the vision. I think that the community outcomes rewording is, in terms of tō tātou hapori, tō tātou taia, tō tātou kāinga, is a very good way of approaching this, so definitely strongly in support of that. Likewise, in the strategic priorities, I'm not here to talk about the last two, climate change and the rangatahi and tamariki, the heart of decision making. I think that they are pretty good as they are. My concern is just about the first two. I don't know if they're quite there yet. I had been spending Tuesday trying to figure out how you would come up with better wording around this. The rationale behind this is that I think we use rangatahi and tamariki because they are phrases that actually sit more inclusive and using te Māori as a way to help us articulate the position more clearly. Likewise, I think that one way of shorthanding this as well is to, we use te tātou taiao in our community outcomes, but we don't use it in the strategic priorities. And the reason why I want to be clear about this is that care for our environment perhaps potentially looks at us as not wanting to move backwards, but it also doesn't mean that we look like we're moving forwards either. And even though the idea of us, making tremendous advances and improvement in things like water quality is a long-term part, our outcomes should be focusing on trying to make, for the foreseeable future, making those improvements as well. So the word care, I would change to safeguard, and then safeguard our taiao. And I also want to just make a point here that we have not ever discussed the issue of biodiversity, although we have a number of things that already a council does that fit in that space. Our improvements around the cat, our animals policy, including cat microchipping, the mahi around our animal control and dogs. There are a number of things that we are already doing. It would seem like the evolution of this phrase should actually be about restoring the biodiversity from the harbour to the land. So the phrasing I came up with was, in terms of this one, was safeguard our taiao by restoring biodiversity from harbour to land and evolving waste management. So I really don't like the idea towards sustainable, because I think it's actually, we're going to have to evolve it anyway in some meaningful way. I think evolving it is, for me, more suitable language. The second part is around the advocate for the well-being of our communities. I feel like we need to be a bit stronger on this one. I think we are championing well-being. for ourselves in our work, but also as an advocate. And I also think we need to ensure those voices of those communities are part of that advocacy, that they are being heard and valued. So the suggested wording I had for this one was champion and amplify the well-being and voices of our communities. Those were the specific ones I had. There may be some debate I could have around the community outcomes, but I think that, in terms of strategic priorities, I would really want us to get that nailed down pretty well. So kia ora.
Ross.
Where I come from is I'm looking at this from a cost lens in terms of potential impact some of these things might have on us as ratepayers in terms of increasing our costs because of things that we're committing to or seem to be committing to in here. So the first thing that I want, and I agree, Jeff, you've made some good points. The first thing, a question I want to ask is, how will any of these strategic priorities lead to outcomes lead to thriving local businesses? I have a concern that we talk about the environment and we talk about social issues, we talk about this, that and the other thing. All those things are predicated on healthy businesses that provide jobs for the people that live in the community and others, and are basically what makes the world go round. All right, they provide money. All right, so I just have a concern about that. I don't have I'd be happy to talk about it in more detail, to make a more detailed contribution. But that's the first thing. So, and the second thing was the whole environment thing, Jeff, that you talked about. I'm happy with that. What does move towards sustainable waste management mean?
Yeah.
I have no idea what that means. We know that our tip has to close and we have to look at alternatives to that. That's going to cause a 5 to 6% increase in our rates anyway after 2030 and maybe before. And if we're looking at, I have no problem with the idea of better waste management. I don't know what sustainable waste management means. I have no problem with that, but I don't want to see it as a strategic priority. It would be an outcome of the other things that we do along the way. So those are my two key points at this stage. Happy to discuss it further.
Yep, I agree with you on that one. Moira.
I also agree with Councillor Leggett. I was sorry when I first looked at this that we were losing reference to the harbour, so I like your suggestion that we reference harbour and land, and I would argue that that then deals with the waste management question as an umbrella. I would disagree, though, that there's a kind of a linear correlation between business development and city wellbeing. I mean, the research actually on local economic development suggests the otherwise, that if you create places that people want to be through placemaking and increase residential development in your city centre, that in turn creates economic development opportunities. So actually the evidence is that it happens the other way around. So I like the direction of Councillor Hayward's suggestions. Kia ora.
Kathleen.
I like the community outcomes. In particular, we sort of moved from thriving economy to more specifically thriving local businesses, which I thought was great. I would like it to be in our strategic priorities, though, as well, like something there around businesses and the economy, because I think that is very important, and especially at looking at a circular economy within, our council business. The other thing that I wanted to say was I was surprised that the harbour came off, because we didn't really talk about that coming off the strategic priority. So that did surprise me. I know it's listed in the outcomes, but I feel like that needs to be a priority. Then it got me thinking, because I read on the slide about, what a strategic priority is, which is goals focused on the key issues we want to address in the next 3 years. And so then my question was thinking, okay, so does this mean that because we're moving to the new entity, we can't do that same thing for the harbour or not? So that kind of got me thinking about that. So a bit of clarity on that would be good. What made you kind of take that off altogether? That's sort of just top of mind at the moment.
Great. I can just address that harbour question. It's always a balance, isn't it? Because we spoke a lot about the environment and the broader environmental outcome. So really this was one way that we could reflect that feedback. The thinking around the harbour is that the Harbour Accord is now quite well developed. We'll be reporting against that regularly. There are defined actions. Is that enough? Do we also still need to put that in a short-term priority, given we have that collaboration, the actions? I don't know the right answer. This is just putting it on the table for you to decide as a council.
Sorry, I think when we were talking about the environment in the last, and this is just from my recollection, we were more meaning to bring the environment and the climate change together rather than that's where my thinking was last time. Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, look, I like the thrust of what you've got for us here. What I was thinking about is, with all the talk of us amalgamation and things like this, how do we tie in with the priorities of other cities around the area?
Yeah, we are actually quite aligned. If you look at the strategic frameworks of councils in the region, they're quite similar. It is around thriving local businesses. It is around the environment. It is around people. So we typically, most councils have a people element, environment element, and an economy business element. The wording's slightly different. In regards to speaking to regional connection, that's why we suggested adding that outcome around being regionally connected in the way of infrastructure, relationships, and everything.
Josh?
Yeah, thanks. Overall, broadly happy. Agree with a lot of, in particular, Councillor Hayward's comments. My observation actually is, based on the discussion we had last time, I'm not surprised that a specific reference to the harbour isn't in here. In saying that, I do think we should have one, and I do want to have it there as well. I think that probably the biggest concern, I think I mentioned this last time, the biggest concern I had with the way we were talking about things was we did go very broad, and I think the wording you have here does reflect that conversation we had, but I think this is probably a good sense check around saying, actually, we don't want to feel like we're going backwards on harbour focus. So, yeah, I think that would go back in, and the particular wording, I did really like that wording that you proposed, Councillor Hayward, on that one in particular. I think there's probably a degree of, we need to figure out exactly what the intent of these priorities are. Are these the North Star that we're moving towards? Or are these, here are the things that we're really thinking about doing specifically in the next couple of years? And the reason I ask that is I think potentially where we land and what we include will be framed by that. I was thinking about it in the context of the comments from Councillor Leggett about potentially a specific reference to something like business, for example. And the question I would have is, do we want to be moving towards, if we're approaching this from like this is a North Star perspective, I don't know if we need to have a specific reference to business in there, because I think you want to have good business as part of a thriving community, and you have that good business for the purpose of jobs because it improves well-being, as opposed to you want good well-being because then you're going to have more business, right? So if we are moving towards that, I don't know if we need the specific reference to it. I think where we're going at the moment on this is probably more where I would be thinking. I do think it is important to have a distinct climate focus in the way that you've proposed it at the moment as well. I think the question of what are we doing in relation to climate change is actually a very, very different thing to what are we doing about our environment generally when it comes to harbour health, for example. When we're talking about climate, we are talking obviously emissions, but we're also talking about resilience. We're talking about what our cities look like in the future, and I think that is a very distinct conversation. So I wouldn't want to muddy the waters too much by merging it in with another environmental focus. So overall, I'm broadly happy with this. I would support the comments made by Councillor Hayward. I don't think we need major changes. The last comment I would make is advocate for the wellbeing of our communities. One of our roles is advocacy, absolutely. But when I read advocate, it feels a little cop-out. It's sort of like, every policy issue that comes up, everyone people say, well, the answer is education. And say, okay, yeah, well, sure, it's easy to say that, but what are we doing to actually achieve that? So I think the intent is right there, but something like champion or a more active verb, I would like to see. That's me.
Noted. Thank you.
For me, I agree with Jeff. I don't like sustainable waste management the way it's written. I prefer the harbour and land. The rest of it, no problem. Do you want a picture of a dog and a cat in your people picture, Jeff? That's the only place I can think where you get a dog and cat. But Kylie, I saw your hand go.
I'd like to say yes, please, to the dog and cat picture.
Bird in as well.
Actually, I remember this conversation last time Councillor Bylaw was around boyfriends and partnerships. That always just comes back to me when we're talking about our city strategic framework, so I'm not too sure how that's just stuck. I agree with Ross in regards to being careful about our messaging and what we can, as a council, can and do in the future. But I also agree with these two councillors over here. In regards to replacing the word advocate, because I said exactly the same as you. Advocate just sounds like, oh, that's just easy and, that's just a bit of a cop-out, really, And I love the word amplify. I really do like that word. That's just my 2 cents.
I think we've all sort of hit it pretty well. Advocate's a dog of a word, I'm afraid. Dog. The dog in there, and the cat. Care for the environment, but safeguard the environment. Like that sort of still accepts it as what it is, and we want to nurture it. That's just. I was thinking of a word, and that's just popped out now.
I will happily substitute nurture.
That's So I think amplify. Amplify was the word that came out instead of advocate, and I think rather than safeguard or care for our environment, that sort of accepts it for what it is. We're striving. These are priorities. We're striving for something better than what we've currently got. We don't want to accept the status quo. So nurture. I don't know.
That's where our harbour has to come in. Kathleen?
I this just dropped in now. When you were talking about the environment, I was thinking this is really kaitiakitanga, and I don't know whether that goes in as the wording or whether it's being good stewards of our harbour, our environment. Just sharing that just popped in now.
Jeff? Remember, we're not going around 100 times, but I'll go to you,
agree.
Jeff, and then Hemi.
I'm going to use the last opportunity to talk on this because I want to bounce back some of the thoughts that have come from other councillors. I'm going to start with Councillor Fellows. I think that was one of the words I had on Tuesday, trying to go, how do we bring in kaitiakitanga into this? And I thought that's why I just kept with taiao, but I think that there's a point here. But I really love the idea of nurturing because it takes the active and proactive. There's a proactive word that allows us to actually hold to our higher ambitions as kaitiaki. In terms of harbour and the challenge that you've had in terms of trying to bring it in and pull it out, and the point being that the harbour accord is, was settled and brought. We still have te ao huri huri, and that is a strategic document as well. And yet that is still here as a strategic priority. It stands to reason that both of these things, which are big strategic priorities, should be maintained. I think you're getting a sense from everybody around the table on that one. Regarding business, there's two parts to this. One is, and it's both to Councillor Leggett and Councillor Filaw's points. We must divest ourselves from the fallacy that getting more businesses in Porirua means more economic growth that leads to more rates for Porirua, because it's not that straightforward. A business that has, whether they have 100 customers a day or 10,000 customers a day, is still paying the same amount in rates to this council. And so that we must disabuse ourselves of that fallacy that creating more businesses is going to help our council. However, with regards to Councillor Filaw's point, how we play a role in shaping the future workforce, the future businesses, the locally owned and run businesses, the local individuals who are going to build this city today and over the next 10 years and beyond, that is, I think, an important part of that corridor. But I think that could be covered in the Our Home section. But I just think that nuance is really important to me, and I really wanted to just illustrate that. Likewise, there is, for me, when I look at these, the strategic priorities for me are the trigger for us as a council to lead into work like strategies and plans. If the language isn't incorporated in here, then we have not made a justification in the LTP as to what we will be doing. So I think that, yes, they are broad, but that's because we have to hang on a whole heap of other tasks to achieve that as well. That's why, specificity would be better, but unfortunately we need to, have catch-all so that we can cover off things like biodiversity. There's still, for me, I'm still passionate about, the issues of berms, want to see things around our trees, want to see improvements with regards to cats, want to see improvements to dog control, all those things. We wouldn't put those all up as strategic priorities all on the top, but I will happily take some pictures of
We've
animals.
noted that one.
Yeah. So with that, I don't want to say anything more on this. I just think that was important to add into the corridor. Kia ora.
Okay, Josh, last one.
Mine was just a question actually around on the very last one, and I like that we've got the rangatahi and tamariki. The previous wording, I believe, was rangatahi and tamariki at the heart of our city.
That's right.
I wonder if you could just talk through the shift in wording from the heart of our city to at the heart of decision making.
Yeah, there were some comments at the first workshop around how we could elevate that voice. So this wording at the heart of decision making was an attempt to do that in terms of considering young people in all the decisions that we make, whereas heart of the city, it did leave some room for ambiguity. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And for the record, I like the change. I was just interested in the underlying rationale. So thank you.
What is your final poke, Ross? Seriously?
My final point.
No.
Heart of decision making, I just want to make it clear, it's like that doesn't mean to say that we're going to listen and do everything that children want us to do, just like any others. That's all. That's the only point that I make about those sort of things. I'm happy that we need to listen and take note when needed.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I think you've heard from everybody.
I think
You've
so.
got your notes you need?
We do, and it's recorded. So just to summarise, we will come to TPK on the 23rd of April. That's just to confirm the strategic framework to inform our work on the next long-term plan. We don't actually adopt them until we adopt the next long-term plan. We'll also bring our draft planning assumptions, which are informed by the strategic framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Well done, councillors. We're well on the timing factor. You're doing well. So next up, we move to our three water transfer for Tiaki. I think, Jim, you're up for this one. You're going to take them as... Oh, no, sorry. It's not Jim, it's Lynn. So take it as read, and I'll leave it for you to take off.
Morena. The purpose of this session is to take you through the process and the background of the assets that we are including in the draft transfer agreement for the transfer of assets to Tiaki. Just want to step you back to this time last year when Porirua City consulted with our community and we had a preferred option there to create a jointly owned water services organisation and to transfer the assets and the debt. And then that followed on with council approving that preferred recommendation. The Water Services Development Plan, which assumes that the assets sit with Tiaki Wai, and then the partners agreement in December, which covers the transfer process. So that brings us to where we are now.
Someone's got the clicker. There we go.
So there's been a lot of work that's been done over recent months to collate all the information to go into the transfer agreement, the draft transfer agreement. We've been going through a process of review this month, and then per the partners agreement, next month all the draft transfer agreements are shared with Tiaki Wai and with the other councils to do a comparison and a review, make sure that we're taking a consistent approach. What we're working towards is for council to sign off on the transfer agreement at the end of May and for the agreements to be executed in June. Right, so there's some transfer principles that have guided this piece of work to ensure that there's a consistent process across councils. The first one is that the responsibility for all water services transfer to Tiaki Wai, and this one's important because there may be some assets that stay with council, but the responsibility for the water services, the management, does transfer to Tiaki Wai. All water services assets transfer, and there are some easy ones here. So there's all the below ground pipes transfer, the above ground reservoirs, etc. transfer. Stormwater has been a bit more of a grey area, and there has been a separate stormwater task force that have come up with a standard list of stormwater assets and descriptions and whether they transfer or not. So that has guided our thinking around what stormwater assets transfer. There is one ongoing discussion point, and that is around out-of-service assets, and that has been worked through with Tiaki Wai and councils to ensure that we have a consistent approach for that. Out of service, so no longer used. Land should transfer where its primary purpose or predominant use is water services. So fee simple land is simple, that transfers. Reserve land, in most cases, our latest legal advice is reserve land can transfer. There will be some reserve land that won't be able to be transferred under the Public Works Act. Just to give an indication, so there's approximately 85 to 90 parcels of land that will transfer to Tiaki Wai, and there's about 3 times as many parcels of land that will stay with council. And that's because the predominant use is amenity value rather than water services, so it's got a shared purpose for that land. What's really important through all of this is that we're going to retain access for walkways and connections. So for the public, irrespective of what assets and land transfers, there should be no visible change for the public. So I'm going to hand over to Megan and Julia now, who will talk through the specifics on some of the assets and land.
Can you hold it
won't
to
be
the end, Ross,
transferring.
while I'll put you down.
Do you want to do questions as we go so we don't need to dial back? No?
Your question relating to what she just talked about, or an asset?
I just wondered whether if council wanted to put in a new walkway, they would have to negotiate with Tiaki Wai.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so what we're going to do is kind of walk you through some of the sites. I appreciate this is one you've been discussing this morning. And this kind of gives an explanation of the different types of land, why it's transferring, looking at the principles. So this is the wastewater storage tank. It was purchased, the land was purchased with a water purpose in mind. It will transfer to Tiaki Wai. So the land will transfer to Tiaki Wai, the tank will transfer to Tiaki Wai. We do have some designation conditions on it, but that is an access agreement is in place with Ngāti Toa for the collection of harakeke, and also there's some fish spawning that happens in the Porirua stream there. So that will still be, that will, as it is, it'll transfer. The operational date is late April, so we should be capitalised by the 1st of July. The land surveys may not be completed by the 1st of July, but this is an asset that is going.
sorry, Mike, does this relate to this?
I just wonder, all the easements that exist for the council at the moment, like, what happens to those? Do those transfer as
So
well?
easements transfer as well. So we have a list of 6,500 easements from Lynn's, which we are trawling our way through. And more importantly around easements, so at the moment, is we're trying to capture the ones where we believe there should be an easement and there isn't. So that's actually more of the issue for us at the moment there. But yep. If it is a water asset and there is an easement there, it transfers to Tiaki Way.
So the wastewater treatment plant land, so we acquired this land back in the 80s. So part of the land was acquired for the treatment plant. That was approximately 30 hectares. That part of that land will transfer. The remainder of the land was purchased for a buffer to the treatment plant. It's predominantly used like it's reserve. We're not proposing to transfer that land. There is, obviously there are some underground assets on the land that we aren't transferring. So Tiaki Wai will have a licence to access that underground infrastructure. So there's a water pipe, there's the tunnel, there's the main sewer pipe, but we will also keep some access, whether it's an easement or a licence to the coast, because a lot of people use this part of that land to access the Esplanade Reserve.
Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, so now we have Stemhead Lane, high level reservoir. So there's a lot of parcels of land up here in Stemhead. And so there is the current reservoir and there is also the new reservoir that is being built up there with Kāinga Ora. So this picture that you've got is just showing the parcel of land that was purchased for a water purpose, which is the reservoir, which you can see on it, and obviously the bit below it is where the new one is going to go. We are transferring this parcel of land. We are not transferring the other parcels of reserve that sit around it. We are having easements over the land for walking. So the walking tracks that go through here, we will have an easement over that with Tiaki Wai, so that the water is, the connection is still there because it connects to the Skyline walkway. And there's also what you can't see in this picture. We, as part of the agreement with Kāinga Ora for the new reservoir, we purchased a house, 19 Stemhead Lane, for the purpose of a construction site for the offices. For the construction workers who are building. We're proposing to transfer that asset as well, because we were always going to dispose of it at the end, and Tiaki Wai as well.
Moira?
At the end.
Kind of a general question that this is an example of. In this process, as we transfer, if you like, the main piece of land, but we have other land holdings around that, are we going to end up with sort of remnant reserves that we're going to need to do some planning around?
Good question.
If we register the easements, we won't. We're trying very carefully not to alienate, probably, those connections and those pieces of land. Actually, the next one is one where we're considering that quite carefully. So we hope that's not the case.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the picture is for the next one you're talking about. Ross?
Just explain to us about the house. So the house is an asset which we paid for. Why should we transfer it to Tiaki Wai?
Because they'll pay for it to us.
Okay,
They won't
it's
have
already,
finished the reservoir by then.
well,
Yeah.
yeah. So okay,
Yeah. So that'll be as part of the asset value that we are giving to them. That will be included in the asset value. I'm presuming, yes. Ian is nodding at me. Yes, great.
So Pope Street Reservoir, there's 2 parcels of land here. So the larger parcel with the reservoir, emergency tanks and some other equipment, and I think there's some comms side on that will transfer. The primary purpose of that piece of land is water services, so it fits with that transfer principle. There's another piece of land, a narrow piece that you can see there, and it has a comms tower that's partially on that site, number 50, and partially on the reservoir site. And there's another little building with a hut beside that has some comms equipment and other equipment in it related to the reservoir. At this point, we're not planning on transferring number 50, which is the smaller parcel. We will take easements or a licence across the reservoir site to access that smaller parcel. But at the moment, is it primarily used for a water service? We've kind of got a foot in both camps there. You know, it's for our emergency management comms, plus it has some water services aspects. So at this point, we're not proposing to transfer that smaller utility reserve. It is a local purpose utility reserve. But we may change our opinion on that as we go through the conversations with Tiaki. We also acknowledge that actually on the reservoir site, it's amazing views of our harbour. So that's why retaining that access for the public is also important. Good. Yep. The Whitby catchment. So all the water services, where do I start? Okay, so these, what we call Whitby Lake reserves, lower and upper, were original sediment ponds from when the development was being constructed that then got vested in council as reserve. So their primary purpose now is stormwater detention. So in this instance, we're proposing to transfer the parcels that have the sediment pond, the stormwater ponds on them. Obviously, there's an amenity and recreational value with these parcels of land, so we will continue to have public access easements, like it's likely to be easements over these parcels. And with the upper lake, obviously there's ecological values as well with the vegetation, and there'll be a service level agreement with Tiaki and the parks team about those ecological areas. So in some instances, we may continue to look after some of those ecological areas, and and obviously that's important to the community as well. But it's likely that at least 2 parcels of land. Some of these reserves are made up of 6 or 7 parcels of land. So the water component, basically the ones that contain the stormwater pond, will transfer. Moira.
I'm trying to work out, I guess, how your criteria are operating, like the difference between this and Aotea Lagoon or Plymouton Domain, etc. And it seems to be whether the land or the asset has been mixed purpose in the past. I suppose, I mean, I have a number of questions. I have a question about whether we have engaged with the community around this or Cannons Creek, because they both seem to have landed up in the same category. I think there would be some argument about whether the Whitby Lakes are primarily a water services asset, and you'll have seen the debate, you'll have seen the pamphlet that the developers put out saying you'll be able to float boats and be in kayaks and blah, blah, blah. So the community, those who carry some history about this development, take the view that that has always been a public amenity. And yes, It also operates as a water services asset, but from their point of view, it's a public amenity. So I guess I'm wondering about that, and I think Cannons Creek, arguably the case is less strong because it was developed as a water services asset, but it very much operates now as a public amenity in terms of how the local community uses the Cannons Creek lakes. And I guess I have a concern that this categorisation will make it harder for their amenity value to the public to be maintained.
Yes, I mean, there is the amenity value. The mixed purpose of assets has been complicated, and some of these are line calls about which way we think they will go. Whitby Lakes, or the catchment, I might hand over to an expert that actually knows more about them, but we have thought about these quite hard, and we do think that the predominant, yes, we have walking paths around it. Yes, years ago the developers said that they were amenities, but from our operational perspective, these fall more into the water services category than the amenity value category.
I think it's important to point out that these are part of the stormwater network, the stormwater system, and we'll be very reluctant to keep that little piece of the network in-house when we're actually moving all the skills and resources across Tiaki Wai.
And those lakes were set up for stormwater.
Just a follow-up
Right.
though, but might it not be possible to transfer the water services asset and retain the land for each of those?
Yeah, we did look at that as well. We looked at could we subdivide out the actual concrete asset, the concrete basin, and determined that actually that would be more complicated. That comes with a whole heap of things because the walkway around the top of it is actually built into the top of the basin. So separating that would be very difficult.
Councillors, remember that we will have agreements between Tiaki Wai and ourselves on service levels where there are joined services, basically. So, and that's going to take a while to work through, but we will be looking at how we manage these. So we would see our parks still retaining a role in all of these. And, the Tiaki Wai and each respective council has to work through site by site on all of these. So, but it doesn't mean that it won't continue to be used in the way it is currently used, simply because we are transferring the asset and the land that it sits on. We've tried to make the call that is the most sensible, and but we continue to have an interest in maintaining it for its current purpose as well.
Just finally, I take it we haven't engaged with the Whitby Residents Association on the lakes, and there are very strong views in that community, so that's one issue. I think in terms of Cannons Creek, that's a community that often doesn't speak up for its parks and public spaces for lots of reasons in terms of the complications of people's lives, but the Cannons Creek lakes were a very neglected area for a long time, and we have just got to the point where we are improving the amenity value of the lakes, and the community is quite engaged. And I would be very reluctant to see anything that put that at jeopardy.
Josh.
Yeah, thanks. Just trying to understand, I guess, the implications for the future. So using the Whitby Lakes as an example, we've talked, we know that this isn't going to happen in the short to medium term because of costs, but we know that the aspiration of some members of the community around the Whitby Lakes moving in the wetland direction in the long term. And so I'm thinking about discussions might be happening, 10, 20 years when we're potentially in a different financial position. What would the difference in process look like if the community wanted to advance that aspiration with the land being owned by us versus Tiaki Wai? So under what is being proposed here, but basically what I'm trying to figure out is if the community is coming to us as the council and wants to have a serious conversation and saying we actually want to change what this is. Obviously, it has a stormwater function, but we really like the other wetlands that are popping up around the city. Would like to go in that direction. But would council have any ability to meaningfully advance that if we don't own the land? And then I guess the flip side to that is, would we have any meaningful ability to advance that even if we did own the land? Once the assets are gone, like is it a largely? Here's a better question: is this an academic discussion?
Community would need to raise the 20 million probably provided.
I realise that, and I
Problem.
realise we're not talking about this in this council period, but this is the future. This is where it lands. So I want to know if there are any actual practical implications of this.
Councillor, I think our role is mostly around leadership and advocacy. Could I use that word? Because Wellington Water doesn't have the resources to do what we would all love to do on the site. In the future, I don't think that's any different. I think the leadership will probably come from here, but we won't own the assets anymore. So it'll be Tiaki that we'll have to bring on board with us. But our role will be very much convening, bullying, cajoling to get something like that across the line. But I actually don't see any massive practical change from the situation we're in now. In fact, we could be in a better position if they have better access to capital than we currently.
Thank you. That is helpful. Just to clarify, do you see the question of, because obviously regardless the assets are moving across, there's this discussion around, is it possible to unpick that from the land? And that it seems the answer may be no. But if it was, would there be a meaningful difference for the purpose of that discussion with the land transferring versus it not?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, that's helpful to understand for me. Thank you.
Ross?
No, I don't want to prolong the discussion.
Thank you. Kylie?
Been answered.
No, pretty much, Mike, thank you, answered my question around Tiaki and the better access to capital, because I think you'll find the Cannons Creek community would actually welcome and appreciate some sort of activity in that area regardless, and if Tiaki is in a better position to offer that, then I think that's a good thing for the Cannons Creek community.
Agree. So we've covered that one and the next one.
Do you want to talk about this one? Okay.
So Elston Wetland, we're proposing the wetlands, the asset transfers to Tiaki. You might recall back in 2021 we consulted on the easement for the Elston Wetland. There is an easement already in place for water services aspect on this piece of reserve. So therefore at this point we're only proposing to transfer the asset along with the easement. We're not proposing to do any other land legalisation with that. And the easement has maintenance obligations in it, and obviously an operation management plan alongside the parks team. So that service level agreement will come into play again here with this asset versus the water services aspect and the additional amenity.
I've got Moira, Jeff, Josh.
What I wonder is what happens with the wetland that's going into the Cannons Creek Park. Is that, it's not on our list, but is that going to end up in the same situation as this?
So I've got my notes on that because I thought that would get asked. So as we've just consulted on granting an easement, I think it was back in 2024, could have been last year, we're proposing to do the same, that the easement would literally just transfer to Tiaki when it gets registered. They'll be the Water Services Agency. We wouldn't be transferring Cannons Creek Park because we've already got that property right sitting there for that Water Services entity.
Jeff?
You've resolved most of my questions bar one with regards to that one, because I was trying to work through this and understand the consistency of approach with these and showing the working. You've answered that question. The slides, however, this one doesn't actually mention about public access, although it has been mentioned before that public access will be protected as part of whatever arrangements we make from a day-to-day basis that will be still in place. This slide doesn't actually have that. Can I just be clear that that there's not something that you guys are slipping through here, you're fencing off the thing?
I think you missed it off, didn't you? Did you miss it off?
Yeah. So yes, there will be there will still be public access to this.
Kia ora, thank you. No
Josh.
Yeah, sorry, so I'm just trying to clarify, because that makes sense to me, but I'm trying to understand why this is different to the approach that's being taken for Cannons Creek and Whitby.
Yep.
And apologies if you have touched on. I'm just sort of struggling to follow that exactly. If you could explain that.
So the difference is here, the water services aspect, which is the wetland and the detention, it has already got an easement. It's got a property right sitting with it. Whitby catchment and Cannons Creek doesn't have that easement already registered. So that's the only difference. We could have gone the other way with this. We could have said, actually, we're going to, because there is a sports turf, a pavilion, we could have said, let's subdivide this piece, but we don't actually need to do that because the property right is already there over the wetland.
So if that's the case, is there any reason why we couldn't take an approach of just establishing an easement on those other land parcels so we could keep the land and treat it the same way as this one?
We've traversed this in many of our discussions around these aspects, but we think that because those stormwater ponds are primarily used for stormwater at Whitby and Cannons Creek, the principle is that they should transfer. And we keep going back to that principle about what transfers and what doesn't. We're not transferring all the parcels of the Whitby Lake Reserve and there's a whole lot, there's like 6 or 7 parcels in some of those reserves. We're proposing to transfer the ones that have the stormwater detention ponds on them, but retain access.
Is the primary purpose of the Ulston wetland not stormwater management though?
Yes, but we also have a hockey turf and we have a pavilion here.
So
but we
it's
could
the same
do
parcel of land.
same parcel of land. So we could do a subdivision here.
Okay.
We could have gone that approach, and my colleagues have asked me, why are you going this way? And the answer is there's already an easement. We don't have to do any more property work associated with this, but we certainly could do a subdivision using those existing boundaries that have been defined by the easement.
Yeah. Okay, cool. No, I'm certainly not
It's a line
advocating for
call.
that. Yeah, and because for the record, I fully agree with the approach you've taken on Ulston. I'm just trying to unpick why that's different. But that does make more sense to me now. Thank you.
Kathleen?
It was just a quick follow-up. So this example, would there be any sort of financial difference from what's leaving council to go to Tiaki Wai? And in this example, having an existing easement, not transferring the land, versus the same scenario like this occurring in Cannons Creek or Whitby? Like, I'm just trying to, is there a financial implication by transferring the land, or a cost benefit, or
person is left, I notice. All of these assets do get valued, obviously, before they transfer. So because we're transferring an easement versus a piece of land, I'm going to go, yes, I think that there will be a difference there. But I can't really answer that question. Sorry, I don't do the money. Ian does.
Wendy will.
Ian doesn't.
Can I just point out that there is a portion of this land that is owned by Ngāti Toa as well, which is, I imagine, a factor in the consideration here. So we currently lease that land off Ngāti Toa, and that will go to Tiaki Wai, that lease arrangement. So that also adds another complexity to it that doesn't exist on the other properties that we have.
Okay, Aotea Lagoon.
So Aotea Lagoon, so to understand this asset, we have to really consider how it came about. Obviously, the lagoon is the old coastline, essentially. The railway line went through, the state highway was constructed, which left a saltwater lagoon. So there's a number of stormwater outlets that discharge into Aotea Lagoon. They all transfer. In this case, we don't believe the land will transfer because essentially that stormwater, that's its last point. You know, it's reached this is the coast, essentially. It's still coastal marine area. This is basically the discharge point. So in this instance, we don't believe the land will transfer. the assets will transfer, the outlets. The open channel that was constructed in the northern duck pond area, the responsibility for that open channel and the scruffy dome that's there, the asset will transfer, but once again, there will be a service level agreement with the parks team to maintain those aspects.
Ross.
Sorry, I completely agree with this. The open channel you're talking about is the new developed area where the water pools basically going like that, and you put in a
By the park.
dome to collect, and it goes
correct.
out into
Yep.
the... Yeah, okay.
Yep. Plummeton, no other questions? No.
Marvellous.
Plummeton Domain.
Alrighty. So Plummeton Domain. So this is one of those other pieces of land where we have thought about its main purpose. It is a floodplain, as you know, it floods and things, but we have determined that its primary purpose currently is amenity. We have a dog park there, we have the archery club, we have all of those other... Yeah. So in this instance, this is just us kind of showing that there are other bits of stormwater assets that we hold that we're not going to transfer. The stormwater that is within it, the pipes that are underground and swales and all of those stormwater management features will transfer. The responsibility will transfer for those, but not the land itself.
Moira.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the boundaries, trying to work out what that means for Taupo Swamp.
The top parcel... Oh yeah, we took the lines off, didn't we?
Yeah, it looks like
If
Taupo
you zoom in
Swamp's
on your
our land.
iPad, you can see the lines.
Yes, but they suggest, for example, those two bodies of water and right up to halfway up Ulrich Street is part of our park site.
Yeah, we haven't... I've got... Where's Parks? Oh, Stu. Yeah, so we haven't talked about anything changing at Taupo Swamp.
Where if these boundaries are right, we're about to hand the bulk of it to Tiaki.
We're not handing land. This land is not transferring.
Okay.
This land's not transferring.
Kylie.
Yeah, so with the land not transferring, the issues with the flooding over the footpath will still be a parks issue. Or will it actually become a Tiaki Wai even though they're assets? Makes sense?
So it's still so that's part of Te Araroa.
Yes.
So it's still
yes.
a parks issue, and we have a project coming to you on
Right.
exactly that, Councillor.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you. Kylie. Ross.
Along those lines, I was going to say, how do you define or identify swales, for example, that may exist
I'm
there?
so pleased you asked because I've learnt.
Oh, good.
So the swale that you can see, there's a bund at the end, and then the swale goes halfway through the park and through the at the halfway line there. And there's wonderful people in the parks team who look at our actual assets with an intake and an outflow. Mm-hmm. Yep, and the patch of grass in between. There's your channel, and it might be a swale, and sometimes it's concreted and sometimes it's not. And we have GPS coordinates for those that are not concreted.
Karihana Bay.
So, Karihana Bay. So this is the catchment of Karihana, and obviously this is an area of land we're all familiar with. So it has a mixed purpose. Let's kick off with the fact that we're not transferring the land of Karihana Park, so that is remaining with us. We are transferring the responsibility for the stormwater that goes through there. So there are, as you know, there's those channels on the side of the park. There is a stormwater pump on the coastline there, down on the road. There is a weir down there. Those elements will transfer to Tiaki Wai. The park itself stays with us.
Moira.
At the risk of beating a drum, I think I mean, there will be questions from residents about the implications of this, because on paper, this looks very simple, very logical. But, you know, if I'm one of those houses in a flood zone, then I want to know, what does that mean in terms of who takes responsibility for improvements to flooding? You know, so I suppose
Taki wai.
that's all very well, but what does that mean for me as a resident in terms of getting some responsiveness? I guess all I'm expressing, I think, some frustration that we're being asked to make quite logical decisions about what should happen to assets. I don't have a problem with that. But we don't know what the service agreements between council and Tiaki Wai will be, because they're not written yet. Like, we're assuming things will happen in the future that will make all of this work well, but we don't have it in front of us. And for me, there feels, from a resident point of view, some risks. Like, if I live in Cannons Creek, our Parks Department has run regular planting programs on the land that's now going to Tiaki Wai. Will we continue to run planting programs? Will that be a priority for us if the land is now held by Tiaki Wai? These are things that we don't know yet, and it's not until the doing happens that people go, oh shit, I didn't know that was going to happen. Excuse my French. So I'm a bit, I think the implications of this are, I mean, I know this is not really directed at officers. I know this is just existential angst, but I have some.
Stormwater does still remain a joined up service with Tiaki Wai, so the legislation's quite clear about that, and it recognises that a lot of these assets are joined, you know, they have multiple purposes. So we probably can't give you and residents the comfort of the detailed work. We simply haven't done it. But I can assure you that we are aware of that and will be working, because we know our communities better currently than Tiaki Wai does. So we will be working very hard, and our parks team in particular are very aware of where the sort of troublesome parts of our topography are, and where people will feel more anxious about this. So we're pretty motivated to make sure that you know, can, you know, and there'll be some rough patches, but we know ourselves, even in Karihana Bay, when we had that flooding, you know, there was NZTA, and there were multiple agencies who had to coordinate on this, and you know, it certainly was far from perfect, but we at least own this, or a part owner in this company, and we have an opportunity to do the best possible work we can anyway. As we set it up. So it's probably not much of an assurance, because we simply haven't done the work, but we're as motivated as anybody could be to do it well.
Can I just add to that? So on this particular site, there is a camera that oversees the critical spot that's monitored by Wellington Water. So the guys from Wellington Water that do that are currently based up on Broken Hill Road at that depot. It's Simon and his crew, for those who met Simon. Those guys and that camera are all transferring across to Tiaki Wai. So I'd like to give you a little bit of assurance that we're not kind of starting afresh, that those guys are still there, still doing, and will continue to do what they have done with that pump at the beach and monitoring that inlet with the camera that is there. And that's the same across the region.
Ross?
I'm just following on from that, because I think it's a good question. So that camera is on the grate, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
Moira?
Just an answer to my question about planting in Cannons Creek Park. Would that still be on our program or not?
Yes, and can I again give you further assurance that the people who do the planting talk to Simon and his team from Wellington Water, and we'll continue to do that after the 1st of July until we sort ourselves out in something more formal, but it's not our intention on the 1st of July to kind of stop stuff. Life will go on.
Thank you, ladies. That's your last one. Appreciate that. Thank you. We are now moving to our proposed sign bylaw. So Okay, Shiona and Mia, do you want questions going through? You're going to take it as read, and what are you doing?
Yes, taking it as read, and I'll just make a couple of points and then we can get into it if that suits. Okay, so just to reiterate the journey we've been on with this, a while ago when we were developing the district plan, it was intended that the district plan would be the one-stop shop to manage signs, just to make things less confusing. But actually over time, it's been clear that that's quite impractical, particularly with managing sites, so the approved sites for signs. That's because things happen like planting, underground services, and actually doing a plan change, particularly with the plan stop now, to change a site just doesn't make sense. So you'll recall that in December we came to you, and as part of the omnibus change for the district plan, we asked you to remove the approved sites. Now, as you're aware, a plan change does take some time, so that's in train, but it hasn't happened yet. Initially, our scope of this review was to make it easier to have flexibility in the sign site. So it was quite a limited scope. It was around usability and efficiency. It involved pulling out the list of sites, so we didn't need to go through formal consultation every time we changed it. However, as part of any review, we want to test this with you and see whether we should go broader. We're aware of conversations around restricting certain types of signs, or ultimately perhaps other councils have banned certain types of signs. This is possible, but we wanted to put in front of you the interdependencies between the district plan and the signs bylaw, because some things can be quick and some things might take a little bit longer. So really, we're testing this with you. You've got the information. What is your appetite for us to look at further restrictions? Does anyone have any comments on anything to do with this?
I've got a question for you. The signs bylaw in Wellington allows election signs and all other signs on people's fences, and they have no issue whether it's near an intersection. Ours has to be 50 metres from an intersection because stupid roading rule. Why are we not all using the same one? We are looking regionally as being one. I just don't get these stupid rules around, the 50 metres from this end. I had my fence, for example, I wouldn't put any on it, but I'm 50 at one end and 30 at another, and then we see all the land agent signs popping up absolutely everywhere. And we get complaints, but nothing seems consistent with our neighbours. Have you looked at our neighbouring rules around the traffic? Because they said it was traffic that was stopping it, that was roading bylaw because it was a 50-metre thing. So I just wonder who's actually correct. You probably don't have to answer me if you haven't got the answer, because it's just are we looking at their bylaw? And I've got hands going up. Kylie, then Moira.
Thank you. And following on from that, I think the whole 50 metre, 100 metre thing is just bollocks. Sign's a sign. You should be focused on the road anyway. Who's to say they're not actually for walkers or cyclists or whatever? So I'd like to see that gone. Also, in regards to, last year we had a few issues because we were no longer able to use metal stakes. And that was a problem because metal stakes, although they say they're not great for the environment, they're actually safer for boards not going anywhere for a start. They look tidier than those ridiculously, put together wooden stake ones. They're harder to vandalise because you can't really pull them out of the ground. And to me, they just look tidier and better because they're also more level. So I'd like to see that being looked into from, I guess, an election sign point of view. I'm not really worried about real estate signs. Hang on. Let me just... I've gone from election signs to real estate signs. It's not really a good look, but... I think that I don't have an issue with those, and I also don't have an issue with those little directionals either that people put out.
Moira.
Yeah, just election signs aside, I'm just trying to understand, our slide 41, what others are doing. I guess it's similar to the Mayor's question, what I couldn't quite understand from your suggestion that maybe we had some sort of middle ground, are we suggesting adopting, for example, a list of curated sites but requiring a permit before using? I just couldn't quite see whether we're going for regional consistency, and if so, what that would be.
Yeah, so we actually do already permit election signage, as you are well aware. We don't permit for community signage, and the reason that we don't do that is because we had feedback from the community that they're really well utilised, and actually applying for a permit every time they want to put up a gala sign is just not practical. In terms of consistency with our neighbours, I might ask Jack to comment a little bit because he's done a bit of research, but it depends on what mechanism they're managing it in. So some rules are in some district plans, some rules are in bylaws. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. The main message is, I think, is that it's good to have some type of mechanism to manage and regulate signs, whether you ban or restrict certain types. Jack, did you want to comment on our neighbours?
Yeah, just looking around the region and also across Aotearoa as well, it's a bit of a mix between banning public sites entirely and just allowing them on fences and things like that, and then the approach that we've currently got of a certain number of public sites. Yeah.
Did that answer? Okay, Mike?
Yeah, getting back to the 50-metre one, I thought NZTA had some involvement in that. But at Titahi Bay on the Onipoto Park, there's some waterworks going to be done on
Is there a
the
big
main
sign?
road.
Yep.
And it's an enormous sign right on an intersection.
I assumed they had to get a resource consent for it because it's like 3 times the size of a normal sign. I would assume they had to because the rest of us have to get resource consents. Yeah. They've heard us. Josh.
Back on election signs again. It feels like ours go up way earlier than everyone else's. And I just checked out Bylaw 9 weeks before polling day. Our signs can go up. The other ones go up way later.
Others are 6 weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know about everyone else around the table. 9 weeks is far too long for me to see my own face on the side of the road. I would not mind us looking at potentially bringing that in line with the rest of the region.
Yeah.
If that could be done as part of this review.
Cool, happy to look into that. I just want to point out, I believe the 9 weeks is to be consistent with the Electoral Act. I think that's why, yeah, but I can look into it.
But Wellington are 6 weeks, so yeah, it would be interesting to know. Jeff?
Part of my feedback will be about election sites. I guess my view has been that the bylaw allows the, as has been the case in Wellington, to create as-of-right rules. So it allows a more permissive process so long as it fits in specific criteria for use. So that, those things are size, visual acuity, which is the NZTA thing, the primary purpose, the land type potentially could also be a matter in terms of as-of-right rules. So if it's on a fence or on a line attached to a property, and I would also, I'll reflect later on the role of boat sheds, but also a specific period as well. So obviously in Wellington, events are, you're allowed to put up a sign, but it's for an event that's within 4 weeks of that event. So again, I think if a bylaw achieves those as-of-right rules, it's good. It will streamline process, and it will give people consistency about what they want. I also, I'm going to come to the election signage thing. I think, the balancing act is balancing between the Electoral Act and the regional consistency. I think that you'll get that from all the other councillors. This is where, I have a little bit of an advantage of not just being a candidate and, but also before then having to be responsible for a nationwide campaign of 71 electorate races and all of the council bylaws related to that. And the not wasted, but certainly considerable amount of time having to discuss with teams all across this motu about the different rules. It is a complete mess from a nationwide perspective. If we can be consistent about this, this will also help us with our communities as well. I think there also needs to be within the bylaw perhaps some language about how appeals or complaints are handled. We do not want to create a window where certain individuals create vexatious complaints that end up in places where they should not be ending up. Fourth, I think, this comes back to the community side of things. This is around the potential permitting process should have some latitude around the periods. For instance, if you create a permit system for community signs, you're probably not going to need to have a time period that's short. You would want one that's longer. So again, just think about the bylaw and how you create that mechanism that for smaller events, you would have a shorter time period. For community signs, you'd have longer periods and so forth. Be mindful of that as you have those discussions. Likewise, sponsored signs. This is another one of the community sign things. Right now in Titahi Bay, we don't have a sign that leads into White House Road shops. It was knocked down by some drongo, and we've been, I've been trying to keep a hands-off approach of it because I think it's the community who have come forward with council trying to work through that. Now, it has not been straightforward, and there's been frustrations from time to time that I've had to kind of help, soothe and deal with. A bylaw would help deal with those issues, and that way the restoration of a sign could be useful. Furthermore, I use the phrasing around as of right for primary purpose. We should be flexible in when signs are sponsored by other entities to provide that sign. For instance, we have events where real estate companies, for instance, sponsor for events and they have their signage on there. I've got no problems with that. Why would I have any problem, therefore, for a community sign where it's sponsored by the local businesses and they want to participate as good civic leaders that they want to contribute to the community? Again, the as of right rules need to have some real flexibility in that so as to create that potential. Final reflection, election signs. Had you asked me approximately midday on October the 12th, I would have told you to get rid of all the bloody signs. Anyone who wants to read into this can go and read The Victory Lab by Sasha Eisenberg and the work of Gerber and Green and look into the impact of signs on the propensity of people who are unlikely to vote. But I'll give you the shorthand, it makes sweet F.A. difference. If we do go down a no signs policy, we would be drastically different from all the other signs, all the other bylaws across the region. But I honestly think that as an election tool, while they are useful, they certainly should not be the focus of how we participate in the electoral process, nor should people have to figure out who to vote for based on how many signs or whose signs they are, because then we've really let down democracy in general. Kia ora koutou.
But that brings the boat sheds into, because we haven't spoken about that, and
the boat
I
sheds,
want that fixed.
So that was exactly my point about the boat sheds. So obviously for those who don't know, but this was covered in the last meeting before we went to election, there was an individual who was persistent in launching complaints about my sign attached to a boat shed. Now that boat shed is not a property, and moreover it was actually on a licence to regional council, though we have boat sheds which are on licences to Porirua City Council. So location, when I said about the as of right rules, that has to be very clearly defined. I would agree that in that one instance, the council it was a favourable decision in my instance, and I think that is the approach for the future. So I don't want to see us to restrict that, but I do also want us to have clarity around that, lest any candidate have to deal with a series of emails that go to Porirua City Council, Greater Wellington Regional Council, the General Secretary of the Labour Party, and the Leader of the Opposition.
Over a pathetic baby sign.
And they were wrong in each of those instances, and this vexatious behaviour has to stop.
Yes, we've called that one out. Anybody else? No hand? Oh, yes, Kathleen? Kathleen, I had you written down.
I just wanted to talk a bit about the sites, particularly because I think I read in there that you wanted to get this kind of the ball rolling because government elections are coming up and there'll be signs obviously going up.
Yes,
Yeah.
and also we're consulting on public places and smoke-free, and we have to consult on this so it is efficient to do it together.
Yeah, great. So my question is, this just got me remembering during the last elections, gosh, where is it? It's on Mana Esplanade, you know, the one where in front of the mobile. Yeah, opposite that, thank you. Brain fog. Opposite the Z. If I recall it right, I got a phone call saying that the signs had to kind of be shuffled along because were they on private land or they something like that, and they had to be moved. And I was told, "Oh, don't worry, you don't have to move it. We're getting some people in to move it." So, and apparently the owner in that area, the mobile homes owner business, I think was quite distressed about the whole situation. So, yeah, what's sort of the learnings from that particular site or any other sites? Is that what you're looking at in this bylaw?
Yeah, so as part of this review, we will, and we have done most of it, done an audit of all of our existing sites to see if they're still fit for purpose. So that involves looking at the boundaries and where the signs should go, adjusting things where necessary. So I think I'm not familiar with that particular case, that the team might be, but I think the audit of the sites will address those types of things, which is good practice whenever you're reviewing something to look at all of those sites. So we'll be doing that anyway.
Cool. Yeah, thanks.
What about Plympton in the industrial park? We have a bakery in there. They've got a tiny finger sign up where they are, but they are not allowed to put out a sandwich board like other ones. And we promote one, but we don't promote the other, so we don't seem to have the same rules and regulations. And I would have thought it was fairly obvious to have something like that. But just can we make sure those all work? Because it's not fair to one business when someone else does it.
Yeah.
And the pies at Urban Bakery, great. Josh.
Just really quickly further to Kathleen's points, the sign site, and I'm sure this will be picked up in your audit, along Papakowhai Road. It was a really unfortunate situation where everyone had to put up signs amongst the planting. And there was a spot right next to it that didn't have anything, that I think we originally all put our signs in and then had to, and I think everyone acknowledged it was ridiculous at the time, but we were constrained. And so I guess fixing that specific problem, but also it would be great for there to be a mechanism in place so that inevitably when a mistake happens in the future, because we'll get things wrong, there will be mistakes, there will be things like that that bubble up, that we're able to address that when they happen, instead of saying, well, sorry, for now you have to put your signs up in the garden and we'll wait a year to review the process.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we could build something in there, that would be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Not an ideal situation. I think absolutely, but also taking the sites out of the bylaw and being able to update them more regularly without public consultation will help us do that. So communicating internally with planting and then actually removing that site and changing it prior to any signs going in the ground will help that as well.
Jeff.
This may be more of a question. In terms of trying to prevent the scenario where you've got, my gosh, my mind just went blank, but it was more to do with regards to how you manage those locations where you've got, actually, I'll take it offline. But I just wanted to point out with regards to visual acuity, one of the things that always felt uncomfortable with me with regards to this issue of the 50-metre rule was that by the road code, you're allowed to put a car within, I believe it's 6 or 7 metres of an intersection. What is on that car is entirely up to the individual who is driving that car. But it could have messaging on there, and yet we would not prevent that car from parking within the intersection for the reasons of visual acuity. But at the same time, we would have for any structure, short term, being in this case an election period, a 50-metre distinction. And if anything, the visual acuity issue would be even more magnified by 6 metres on the road as opposed to off the road. So I just, again, would highlight that point as a practical inconsistency, well-intentioned, but a practical inconsistency.
Anything else?
Could I please summarise before we bring you back a document? So what I'm hearing from this conversation is really our scope is okay, but we also need to look at some rules and make sure that they're practical. So we'll take away all of your feedback and make sure it makes sense and that we're improving usability where we can. But that we're not looking in this review to restrict our sites, but we'll make them sensible and make sure that the boundaries make sense. Is that, particularly around sites, is that correct in terms of what we might consult on now and look into perhaps before next local government elections, depending on where RMA reform is and the plan stops, we could look at restricting what types of sites are available, but that's not a now
Well, we've got a
discussion.
government election coming up, so it is really. I'm sorry.
So would you be looking into whether we allow government election signs in this round?
I'm not suggesting to stop them.
Yeah, I think also Parliament is supreme. The legislation overrides anything that we would anyway.
We're just talking about sites, Jeff.
Sorry, I now remember what I was going to talk about. And it is with regards to the audit of site locations, particularly community signs as well. There will be some communities who will be pretty pissed off if all of a sudden, as a result of an audit, that they actually find that they're not compliant. I would hope that we get to a place where we would grandfather in those signs where it was reasonable to do so, because I don't want us to have angry community leaders saying, well, hang on, you guys allowed us to put up the sign, and all of a sudden it's all the rules have changed. So I just, again, I want some real finesse around that particular take.
Thank you.
So-
Okay, was anyone else? No?
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, ladies.
Clear.
Great job.
You.
Thank you. Right, that